Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come in. But if you could take a moment to write in the chat of where you're coming from, it accomplishes two things for us. It makes sure that the chat is working and running smoothly. And also, we get to see where you're coming in from, which I think is very interesting. And I'm coming from Krakow, Poland. I hope you're having better weather than me. Today was quite gloomy, to be honest, but it's okay. Summer is almost here soon. And all right. So we will just start in a few minutes and grab your tea, grab your water, whatever you need. Um, I have my water on standby for me personally. All right, so. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and start it. So, hello, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's session about streamlining accounting for your e-commerce business. My name is Elizabeth, and I will be your host. And about accounting, we know how overwhelming financial management can be when you're running an e-commerce business, especially when you're juggling multiple platforms, payment gateways, and all the moving parts of that. And today's webinar is designed to give you a clear, actionable strategies to simplify your accounting processes and help you reclaim some time back. And I'm super thrilled to introduce our speaker, Andria Radmacher, the founder and CEO of her own accounting and business management firm, A Bigger Bottom Line. With over 20 years of experience in accounting and financial leadership, Andrea brings deep expertise in helping businesses gain clarity and control over their finances. So you're in for a wonderful session, and please be sure to stay to the very end to get your own exclusive Cinder code that will be sent in the chat at the very end. So stay around for that. And without further ado, Andrea, let's go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Andria Radmacher, founder of A Bigger Bottom Line. We're a firm dedicated to helping businesses of all types simplify their financial management, improve profitability, and make smarter data-driven decisions. So I'll go ahead and share my screen at this point, and we'll dive into this webinar. Here we go. So yeah, I introduced myself. So we work with a wide range of businesses, from fast-growing e-commerce brands to service-based companies and everything in between. We're providing practical financial solutions that drive sustainable growth and peace of mind. And I am thrilled to be here today partnering with Cinder for this important conversation about financial operations for e-commerce businesses. So today's topic, again, as Elizabeth was saying, is about streamlining your financial operations. Because let's be honest, the fast-paced world of e-commerce, like nobody has time right now for messy spreadsheets, scattered data, and bookkeeping headaches. So in this session, we're going to cover why streamlining matters now more than ever, the common financial challenges e-commerce businesses face, and 3 practical strategies to simplify your financial processes, and how tools like Cinder can help put those strategies into action. And by the end of this webinar, you will leave with actionable steps that you can start applying right away. So let's start by setting the stage. If you're running or managing finances for an e-commerce business, you already know that it can be like a constant juggling act. You're dealing with multiple sales channels like Shopify, Amazon, Etsy, and eBay, payment processors like Stripe, PayPal, and Square. And you've got refunds, chargebacks, and different currencies if you're selling internationally. And then there's sales tax with rules that vary from state to state and platform to platform. It's a lot. And the complexity can easily overwhelm your systems and you. So in my firm, we've seen firsthand how financial disorganization holds a lot of businesses back. It leads to missed opportunities, cash flow problems, and even tax penalties. But the good news is this is fixable, and with the right tools, it can make a world of difference. So now let's talk about the core accounting challenges we're all up against. high transaction volume. E-commerce businesses can process dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of transactions a week. We've got multiple platforms. You're selling on, again, the Amazons, the PayPals, the Etsy's, the Stripes. You're already managing 4 or more data sources. And then you've got manual bookkeeping. Many businesses are still downloading CSV files, copy pasting into spreadsheets, and trying to match transactions manually. And this is one of the most common and dangerous bottlenecks we see for losing your time. And then there's no real-time visibility. When you don't have access to your up-to-date numbers, you're essentially making financial decisions in the dark. I had a client that had a 6-figure Etsy and Shopify seller store. And they came to me and said, I don't know if I'm actually making money. And this client had high sales volume, but no clear picture of her cash flow or profit margins. And this is a problem we see all the time, but it is solvable. So why does streamlining your financial operations matter so much? Well, number one, it gives you better insights. When you have clean, real-time financial data, you can make smart business decisions faster. And number two, you save time and errors. Automation replaces tedious, error-prone, manual work. And number three, you can stay compliant. The last thing you want is a notice from your state agency or a messy audit because your records were incomplete. Streamlining isn't just about efficiency, it's about protecting your business and positioning yourself for growth. So let's dive into the first strategy, automating bookkeeping and reconciliation. Manual reconciliation is one of the biggest time wasters for e-commerce businesses. You have money coming in from Shopify, Amazon, all the places, and it rarely matches to your bank deposits 1-to-1. So why is this such a problem? Well, because reconciling sales manually takes hours. It's easy to miss fees or chargebacks or refunds, and it slows down your ability to manage cash flow. And we all know cash is king. And that's where a tool like Cinder comes in. So what does it do? It syncs directly with your Shopify, Amazon, PayPal, Stripe, e-commerce platforms. It automatically categorizes the income and expenses, and it handles multi-currency transactions and then matches those transactions to your bank deposits. We worked with a client last year, and it was a multi-channel seller doing about $150K per month across Shopify and Etsy. And before they were using Cinder, they were spending about 8 to 10 hours a week just on reconciling sales. But after implementing Cinder, they cut it down to about an hour. More importantly, there were no more errors and no more late night number crunchings, which was what they were doing before. And one of the pro tips I can give you here is if you set up your sync schedules to be daily, then your financial records stay up to date daily as well. So a strategy, the next strategy, strategy B, is all about real-time financial tracking. If you don't know what's happening in your business today, you cannot plan for tomorrow. So real-time data helps you manage cash flow, track sales and expenses as they're happening, spot trends, and address problems early. Cinder offers live financial reports, auto tracking of refunds, chargebacks, and processing fees, real-time profit margin visibility, and that's amazing. I often tell my clients when you can spot a margin dip, like as it's happening, you have this chance in real time to course correct. For example, one of our clients noticed her profit margins was dipping one week, and the real-time reporting showed an increase in shipping costs, like eating into her profits. So she adjusted her shipping rates and the product pricing, and within 2 days, the problem was solved. So if you can set up financials and KPIs and check them weekly in your real-time dashboard, it's going to help you a lot. And strategy C is automating tax and compliance. Now, tax rules are a nightmare. Every state has different rules. If you're selling on multiple platforms, it's even trickier. manual tax tracking is one of the biggest risks I see in growing e-commerce businesses. And unfortunately, tax agencies, they don't care if you're too busy to keep up with this. Cinder can simplify this by tracking and calculating sales tax automagically. All right. And then you can also beef it up by integrating it with additional tools such as TaxJar and Avalara, which are sales tax automation programs and filing tools. And they can generate tax reports that are ready to file and pay. One of our sellers, I'm giving you lots of examples here, but one of our sellers was hit with a really big tax penalty after a multi-state tax filing deadline because their records were like a mess. They didn't file it on time. So after implementing Cinder, QuickBooks, and TaxJar, she hadn't missed a single filing since, and she was saving hours every month by doing all this tedious work. Plus, the peace of mind is, I would say, worth all the trouble. But one of the big tips I can tell you is just automate your tax reports to run weekly or monthly, and then you know what's coming. So let's quickly recap on what we've covered today. Automating bookkeeping saves time, it reduces errors, and real-time tracking gives you clear, actionable insights for better decision-making. Tax automation, those sales tax tools, keep you compliant and saves you from costly penalties. So at our firm, we see these three strategies completely transform businesses. And thanks to tools like Cinder, it's more accessible than ever to get this. All right, I would love now to hear some questions, and I can answer anything more about Cinder or the beauties of integrating between these tools and accounting software. Do we have any questions? Because if not, I think we've got a couple we can pop in there.
Yeah, of course, everyone, if you have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat. We will be able to see your question, and I will not be answering it, but Andrea will be answering it as the lovely accounting expert here. I guess we'll just wait for a few minutes. But Andrea, thank you so much. That presentation was extremely insightful, and I love how you broke it down into different strategies, and I found them very applicable personally. All right, so we're just going to take a minute in case anyone has any questions, but of course, don't be shy. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
But while we're waiting, I do personally have a question of my own. And you mentioned that automation can save hours each week, which I think is fantastic. But can you share a real world example or case where a business saw dramatic time savings? Because I think having that sort of example is really helpful for anyone within this business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think where the dramatic time savings happens is, like, for instance, you might be able to go over to your Shopify or Amazon or Etsy and run a report there that shows this is how much you sold of, this color shoes, this is the cost, etc. But when you start having multi-channel sales, you need to be able to see how many of those shoes you sold, not just at Etsy, but also at Shopify, also at Amazon, also through your online store, maybe WooCommerce. You now have to take all this time to download each one of these reports that are formatted differently. They have different rows and columns. They have different ways of describing the data. And you or your team are essentially reformatting all this information into Excel so that you can just get down to, hey, how much of this stuff did we sell to our clients? And you're having to put it all together to figure out what were the fees across all the channels, the shipping. And if you have sales tax, you have to remember that you're going to need to do that reporting across the channels and for maybe any physical sales you're doing too. Like if you have a physical store or you're doing that one-off sale, you've got to include what was the total sales you did across all channels. And so if you're taking this time, you or your team are taking this time to have to go manually download each of these reports from each of these e-commerce tools and then assemble them into a reporting, you're just wasting time that you could be using selling those products and marketing your business. So using something like Cinder, it saves you an enormous amount of data, not having to do all that manual Excel file entry. And then you can map them and match them to the deposits that are coming in. And that's a huge time saving. I mean, we've saved a lot of people just on that alone, not having to do that tediousness of compiling all the reports together to get that real-time visibility. You can actually, once you get it into an accounting tool, you can click a button and you can just see all of those product sales you've sold across all the channels in one button click. So instead of taking hours processing this data, you're looking at it and now you're making decisions. So there's huge time saving there by just being able to see everything in one place if you're using something like Cinder and a really good online accounting tool, plus a really good bookkeeper. Gonna need that.
Of course. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, as someone with a background in marketing myself, I definitely see the huge savings of Cinder and everything like that. And knowing that with that, I can devote more time to my own marketing practices and everything like that, it's a big win, honestly, for both sides and everyone involved. And going back to more manual processes, for businesses that are still using spreadsheets or manual processes, what's the first step you recommend to start streamlining their accounting? What's the best course of action for people to take? Because obviously everyone starts off in a different spot and they might just be still using spreadsheets, or they might be on the verge of starting to streamlining, or they're sort of half and half. What advice do you have for those types of people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first step is getting yourself migrated to an online accounting system. That is step one. If you are tracking sales and expenses in Excel, you might have started there like, hey, I get it. We're all like kind of grassroots. We got to get started seeing if we have a viable product here. But you've got to get out of the Excel world and into an actual accounting platform like Xero or QuickBooks Online. There are some others out there as well. But namely, the reason why you want to do that is because then you can integrate with your e-commerce channels and tools to streamline these processes and really automate everything. Because otherwise you're just taking that extra step of putting all that manual data into Excel. And you might even be creating some kind of, interesting brainchild as an entrepreneur that's not following any kind of like generally accepted accounting principles. So you might be kind of seeing a gist of your income, seeing a gist of your expenses, but maybe you're not even building a balance sheet or anything like that that's going to actually help keep you in compliance. So the first step would be, if you're doing a lot of things manually, make sure get yourself migrated. If you're in desktop or if you're in just spreadsheets, get into an online accounting system like QuickBooks or Xero, etc. And then the next step you do after that is to connect your bank feeds to this. That's what really empowers these accounting tools, is you can get this real-time connection. It's so easy. You just log in, it pulls it all in. And now we're saving time there. Instead of manually coding these deposits and expenses, you've got it coming in from the bank feeds. But then you really supercharge everything by connecting something like Cinder to the QuickBooks file with the bank feeds. And now we're cooking with Pam. I mean, we're rocking and rolling at that point, because now you've got automation that's going to take all those bank transactions and e-commerce sales transactions and flow them into one place and auto-magically post them and even help you reconcile them in a lot of cases.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And lovely answer to my question. You mentioned and you talked about Cinder's role in reconciliation and tracking. What feature do you think surprises clients the most when they start using it?
I would say it's the sheer speed at which you can reconcile now. The time it goes away, not having to look at these sales reports manually compared to a bank statement and trying to make sense of it. I think the other thing that surprises them is the amount of transactions that they actually can look over. They can take this big data and make it very simple to see something that they need to see. So before, in accounting back in the day, we really were adverse to putting a lot of transactions into the accounting platforms, especially like in the desktop environment. If you're in QuickBooks Desktop, you're going to hear this all over and over and over again. Like, don't put a bunch of transactions in the QuickBooks file because it's so much manual work. There's so much data to wade through. You're not going to be able to get through it. But if you're using online tools, again, an online accounting platform, and you're connecting something like Cinder, you can pull in vast amounts of transactions without having this problem of overloading your data file, right? If you've got a QuickBooks data file with a lot of transactions, it might run into data corruption errors. It might stall out. You've got all these updates you have to do. If you're staying in the cloud, you can handle a lot more data because you're in that cloud server environment. And that means you can just take on a lot more transactions. And the beauty of that, the beauty of being able to take on a lot more transactions, quickly reconcile them, is that you can get reports that have so much more information on them. A lot of people can only run reports that say, hey, here's my total sales. And when we're working with clients to first start, sometimes it's just, here's my total sales from Shopify, or here's my total sales from Etsy. But when you start using an integrator tool, you can pull out what was sold. You can pull out who you sold it to if you want or not. But you could pull out how many of that particular shoe product you sold. What portion of that sale is shipping? What portion of that sale is tax? And now we've got, the speed of reconciliation, a lot of data, and these juicy reports now that are telling us with a click of a button, actually how much product we sold, when, to who, and the costs associated with it. And that gives you that gross margin percentage that a lot of small business owners are missing because they just don't have this integration. So I think that's the biggest wow is so fast, how fast data can be processed and reconciled and useful with tools like this.
Of course, yeah, it's absolutely a wonderful tool. And listening to all of that and listening to how passionate you were in your presentation and answering your questions, I'm personally curious of what inspired you to focus your accounting work on the e-commerce space, and how do you think that has helped shape the way you help your clients today? I'm quite interested to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially in this world where we've got the internet and there's so many more places you can sell. I mean, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur at heart that's become an accountant because I wanted to figure out the hardest part of business and then go do the fun things. Then I ended up staying here because I geeked out on it and I like it so much. But I think that so many times we just, I don't know, we want to sell the thing, but we don't want to actually put up systems together to see if what we're doing is viable. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have a great idea, but they don't have a way to like test that idea to see if they actually have a viable product they can sell. And if you're doing online sales, if you're doing e-commerce, there's so many ways you can check the viability of whether your local market wants to buy your product, or you're not stuck in your local market. You can expand anywhere in the world to any size market, and you're not limited to just selling haircuts in your local area. So I really got into e-commerce because I saw the scalability of how you could sell one thing through one channel, and then you could reach just such a bigger, broader audience by just finding more places online to sell things. But then that creates its own monster of a challenge, because now we've got all these different sales channels that people really love to buy your product, and it becomes an accounting nightmare. So now you're downloading all this stuff and you're having to manage all these intricate little bits and pieces. And I think some people moved away from e-commerce because they didn't want to have to manage that big data. But Timothy Ferriss of the 4-Hour Workweek, I think he really inspired me. I read his book, oh God, 20 years ago. I'm kind of dating myself here. And he talked about these models, really using e-commerce, using a product-based business as a way to really build wealth and automate and get yourself out of the picture. And so I think that was a big inspiration for me early in my career, and really took my ideas for, we need to do e-commerce. There needs to be more e-commerce in the world to sell things. It's a great vehicle for business owners to really, buy their freedom. But it's presented these challenges in accounting that, these tools can really fix. So if you're not into doing all this integration, there's a lot of other people out there that can, and there's a lot of these software companies that are making it possible so that you can have your dream. You can sell that cool thing that you've been incubating for years, not just in your local region, but anywhere and across different sales channels, and actually see how your progress is going. So you can see if this is a viable idea or not, or if, we need to regroup and sell something else. So I think that's where like my passion for e-commerce came from.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That was very insightful. It was more so a personal question for me, to be honest, but I'm sure that the audience enjoyed hearing it as well. And as we're wrapping up here, if anyone has any questions, if something resonated with you or you're facing a specific challenge, please feel free to write any questions that you have in the chat. We will take the time to answer any of your questions and talk about them. But while we are waiting for any potential questions to come in, I will be pasting in a code that you can use, and all you need to do is contact our support team, and I will send in a link there. If you'd like to contact our support team, you can use that code webinar 150. What the code does is it covers syncs, insights, RevRec, or anything else that you may be interested in that is equal to that amount. So feel free to use that bonus. And of course, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar afterwards to everyone who attended and to those who were not able to make it. And if there are no questions, then we thank you so much for taking your time to spend this hour with us. And Andrea, do you have any closing remarks before we go?
I would say there's definitely a need. If you're doing integration with lots of tools, there's definitely gonna be a need to have somebody in there that can answer a question. We see this a lot where, you might watch on YouTube or online, like, oh, people are automating things. It's so easy. It's so easy. It's so easy. Well, it's easy for those that are pros. Okay. It's easy for me to step into any accounting tool because I've been doing it for over 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult sometimes to just, you might get stuck on one thing, and then you might throw out $1 million product that costs you only $20 a month simply because you got stuck on one thing. So I would say definitely make sure you're partnered with a really good professional that might be able to just get you unstuck in that one area so that you can get these pipelines built. There's an old saying about the people who, there was a town that needed water. Okay. They needed a water system built. They were still actually taking pails and going down to the river and getting a bucket of water and walking it back to town, boiling it and distributing it. And that's how everybody knew how to do things. And they didn't know there was any other way. Well, then the Industrial Revolution comes along and the city's paid by this one guy to set up a pipeline to pump water into the town. And everybody thought it was crazy because he was spending all this time putting this pipeline together. Meanwhile, everybody else is just getting their bucket full of water and taking it to town and doing it the old way. But the guy who built the pipeline, he invested the energy, the resources, putting it together. And then one day he pushed a button and there was water flowing in spades, filling up huge reservoirs because he had a pipeline in place. So if you invest in just at least finding somebody to kind of get you unstuck when that happens, to building a pipeline, you can have a business that has all these sales and just in a click of a button is telling you whether you're doing it right or not. You're getting that sales feedback. And it's a difference between the bucket being, Excel and doing just manual stuff. You might know it. It might be very familiar to you, but it might be really holding you back. So make sure you don't get stuck on one thing when you're doing like this integration, because you really could just have a conversation with a pro for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and now you got a pipeline. So use the chat box in a lot of these software tools and set up meetings. And if you would like help setting up the entire ecosystem, that's definitely something we do. And I offer one-on-one, just 1 hour training here and there. If you've already got an accountant or CPA team you like, somebody in the back office you're working with, great. Sometimes it's just getting them unstuck with one piece so that all these puzzle pieces can fit together and you can really get that pipeline of automation flowing.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That analogy was very insightful and very helpful for me. Definitely help having a professional in your corner is a tool that everyone needs, every e-commerce business, even if you're not an e-commerce business, it's extremely helpful. All right, so if no one has any questions, then Andrea, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights. I personally found it very, very informative and educational. So thank you so much. And with that, everyone, have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, the webinar will be available on our site page and it will be emailed out to you afterwards as well. And of course, use the code in our chat, webinar 150. Contact our support team. They will be more than happy to help you with any of your needs. Once again, thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Bye.